There we go. I took off your mute today too, there, brother. You see
There
that?
we
I'm
go.
like I'm freaking mastering this mute thing. I gotta tell you, buddy, it's incredible.
There we go, brother. We are back, man. I love that you're mastering the everything. Did you share the video, my man? That is the question. There we go. But there we go. Let's get
No,
that. We'll
I
get that for next
actually
week.
I got my iPad here, and I was while we were watching, I was scrolling through because I got an Elon Musk reveals details about his Neuralink brain implant technology, and I'm like, what? This guy's going to be in our brains now too. So sorry, I saw a squirrel. It was shiny.
There we go. All right. Anyways, man, this is Book Club Fridays. We are on chapter 9. I cannot wait to dig deep into this one. This one was, I would say, this was the most relatable to sales to me. This chapter specifically, when he was like talking about different things. And for anybody who's new and watching it, we do Book Club Fridays every Friday. We pick a chapter, and the book that we're on is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So normally we always get started with me, Daniel, but you know what? Let's switch it up. It is Fun Day Friday that we kind of talk about. So, Dan, dig right in, man. What do you got?
Okay, so this chapter was absolutely spectacular. It digs into that world of positive thinking, and it digs a lot into like a personal development side. And the first thing that stuck out to me was, when the narrator says, when we look at the attitude and thinking only positive, will it only attract positive things into our life? And because I think a lot of us, we want to believe we're positive thinkers, right? But our brain automatically goes to negative, so we have to be consciously aware of it to overcome it. And what Eckhart says is, he says, do you truly know what is positive and negative? Do you have the total picture? And we never have the total picture. He goes on to say pain and sickness can turn out to be a great teacher. And that's one thing that I can tell you, and this is why I resonated with this chapter so much, is I've realized that, especially in the last year and a half, like everything that happens to us, regardless of what it is, there's a gold nugget inside of it. And this goes back to when I was 18 years old and first reading Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it's like the 3 feet from gold theory that Sharon Lecter and Greg Reed wrote about. And it's like, with every adversity comes with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And there's a big part to that equation that a lot of people miss, is you got to look for it, and you got to find it, or you got to let it come to you. And this is what the essence of this chapter was to me, because he says, it's seen from a higher perspective as it is what it is. And when we're conscious about it, that's when we get out of our egoic mind. And Ryan, like, don't get me wrong here, right? When my brother died when I was 30 and he was 32, right? You say things to yourself like, how is it cancer took him, but yet there's rapists and murderers that are living healthy as horses? You know what I mean? And it's, you get this, and that's where, and this is where the ego starts kicking in, where it's like, well, and it's crazy, because then he dips into that happiness versus inner peace.
Yeah.
And it's like, happiness, some people are like, well, I'll be happy when when that, you know what I mean? But that inner peace, regardless of what's going on in your life. And he uses a very good analogy. He says, like, if somebody dies that's close to you, you're not going to be happy, but you can find inner peace while it's happening. And you can, like, how many people have you spoken to where they've been sad because a family member died, but they're at peace because the family member was suffering?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I'm just using that because they actually state that in the book, like when somebody dies, right? So if we look at kind of that happiness versus inner peace, it immediately brought me back to something you taught me 3 years ago now, 2 years ago, where I said, Ryan, what keeps you up at night? You know what, Dan? I fall asleep great at night because I know I've done everything I can. So if you do everything you can in a day to make your sales, do your follow ups, like the processes that are going to get you to that dream, to build that bridge you want, you might not be happy with the results because maybe you got voicemail all day. Maybe you didn't get anyone returning your emails, but you can be at peace with the work you've done. And the idea that this work is taking me to where I want to go. And I think that's, from a sales perspective, the difference between happiness and inner peace. And I think as sales reps, when we realize that, um, days that sometimes don't feel as productive, we're at, and this is what you really represent this to me on levels that I've never ever experienced before. And that's why I'm so grateful we're friends, because you're teaching me constantly that it's like, hey, I'm doing this today. And yeah, some days are going to be great. And I'm going to get a lot of replies and I'm going to speak to some people and I'm going to close some business, or I'm going to get calls like you had on Monday where it's like, oh my God, like this is out of the blue and this is really good stuff happening. And then there's going to be days where not much happens, but you still go to bed at peace because you did everything in your power to move the needle forward, if that makes sense. So I honor you, and I'm so grateful that you taught me that, because it's one of the first things I started thinking about when, like, literally 7 sentences into this chapter, it was like Ryan. The chapter just like shouted Ryan to me. So that was my initial thought on the chapter. What about you?
So what you don't know, and for everybody who's watching out there, I actually co-wrote this chapter. No, I'm just joking. I wish I did. That would be pretty
I
cool.
wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it.
No, I love this chapter, Dan. I think this, like I was saying, this one relates so much back to business. And let's go back to a couple things that you said there.
Mhm.
With every day for everybody who's watching, especially when you're in sales, you get beat up. Everyone talks about getting beat up and like coming back with it. But for us, my life kind of changed when I started really looking at my life in decades. So instead of like me looking at the day, looking at the month, looking at the year, like we're coming up to what 2024 in a couple months, and be like, oh my God, I wasted 2023. If you're looking at the year by year, which I want to say 90% of us do. But when I started looking at my life in decades, I'm like, okay, I'm on the right plan. I'm on the right path that I'm supposed to be, right? Because you think about when everybody looks at like resolutions and things that they want to do in a year, time is relative. That's why one of the biggest, I know you talked about things that you learned from me, but one of the biggest things I learned from you is why wait till Sunday? Why wait till Monday? Just start now. Like
Mm.
if you're going to start that diet, or you're going to start working out, or you're going to do all stuff, just start now. It just makes sense to don't wait for like a certain day because there's nothing special about that day. So what I loved about this chapter was a couple points that he made. And the first one was, the nature of duality. And when he's
Mhm.
like emphasizing happiness and unhappiness is a part of the dualistic nature of the mind. And specifically of the mind, I love that he said the mind and not like our life. Because our mind, Dan, you mentioned it here, we kind of get caught up in that negative sometimes. Like there's been, and I feel like different situations, because there was times when I was training really heavy, and I know that you were like a bodybuilder back in the day and stuff like that, but I was at my peak form. And for no reason, Dan, I'd be walking down the street and I'd just be sizing people up. Like, yeah, I could take them. I could take that one. Oh, no, no, for no reason, no reason. This could be like the nicest person in the world. And
Yeah.
I'm doing that, right? So that's obviously my egoist mind talking about that. And, you know, I feel like both of them, they're just states that we kind of like waver in a little bit. We kind of
Yeah.
dance a little bit in them. And, I believe they both represent contentment as well. And when we look at happiness and unhappiness, I see them both as you need them. You can't, like, it's like dark without light.
Left
Day
without
and night
right,
and all
up
that
without
stuff, right?
down.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you need that flexibility. And I really think that you got to enjoy what's kind of happening. Another thing that he kind of mentions here is like transcending the dualistic thinking. So he's like, the mind's tendency to label experiences as good or bad. And I started thinking about that, right? So it's just like, even when we do the podcast, like, is it going to be a good experience or is it going to be a bad experience? It's just like, no, it's going to be an experience. like being in that state of presence, right? It's just like when you finish a podcast or you finish that sales call or something like that, you're going to have some ups and downs. You're going to have that, but you're not going to say, oh, this sales call sucked or whatever. We put a label on it sometimes. And I just think we need to kind of get away from that. And I learned that. And one of the other big things I love that I said that was really relative to sales in this chapter was like not getting attached to the outcomes. And that's something that I've learned from Josh Braun when he does like the poke the bear things that he kind of talks about. It's just like, you know what, detach from the outcome if you're a sales rep. Put in the work in terms of like you can control the effort, the phone calls, the DMs, the videos, all that stuff you do, but you can't control the outcome if the person's going to say yes. So don't get caught up in there. Like don't if that's going to be a state of being, just don't stay there. Like just understand that you've done what you can do and everything's going to happen. But I don't know, Dan, if you're kind of on the same page with this, but I feel like the harder that I work with, the more outputs that I do, the universe kind of blesses me anyways. So at the
Yep.
end of the day, like, a door closes, but then
Yeah. I just totally lost your volume.
that's weird. Okay. All right. Can you
Yeah.
hear me now?
Now you're back. Yeah.
Yeah, that was weird.
So I don't know as the audience, I don't know if you guys heard that last part. Can you just repeat that last part, Ryan?
Yeah, in terms of, like control what you can control and understand, like, don't stay in the sense of, the outcomes. I think when I got into sales, it was like, okay, how much revenue do I want to bring in? How much GP? How many loads do I want to do? How many XYZ do I want to do? But when you realize that those are just numbers and, don't get stuck on those.
Yeah.
Because like if you set a figure, like for example, right, you set a figure that you want to hit 1 million GP in 12 months, which is our mission. What if you did 990,000? Are you going to consider yourself a failure? Of course not, So I understand that, there's always good to go after those goals and don't go after those outcomes. But, if it's like, if I want to get 10 more customers, I don't focus, oh, I need to make X amount of dials. I'm like, okay, I need to have genuine conversations with 10 people.
Yes.
And that's what's going to make the relationship. I don't never put a key figure, even though when we look at like dedicated lanes and getting into that stuff, yes, you can do the numbers, but figure out what you need for relationships and what you're serving that person, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody has I was talking to a shipping manager the other day and they were saying, we get blown up and what makes you so special. And I kind of flipped the script on them too. I was like, I only work with people that I want to work with. So there's nothing necessarily I got to kind of sell myself to you. It's kind of like it's like an interview, right? You've got to sell yourself and they've got to sell themselves as well, right? So once you kind of have that, don't put anybody on a pedestal because that's their
How did
ego.
that go? How did that conversation go? I think this will be a good nugget for everybody watching and listening. When you flip the script on that person,
Mhm.
how did they take it? How did the rest of the conversation go?
So they hung up. No, I'm just joking. I'm not talking about it. No, it went, there was a little bit of a silence for them to actually take that in.
Yeah.
And then I kind of followed up with the things that we do, what we're kind of doing. But I'm not going to be the person to be like, we're going to drop our rate. Like I told them that I am a resource in my customer's business. And I kind of started segueing into like, these are the customers we work with. If you want the phone numbers and emails, call them and figure out what you would like. Get your opinion from there because they'll sell better than I do. I know what I bring to the table. So for me, for anybody who's kind of watching out there, my sales, I don't say tactic, but my sales mission is to get on that conversation, understand if we fit, and then I move to like a trial because like I love trials. So I love to kind of get that, like, let's say like that 5 to 15 shipments kind of going. And then really that's my like benchmark, that's my benchmark or work with the customer. So it's just like, hey, if we screwed up in any of those, or we didn't say what we were going to say and we didn't commit to those things, then I'll give some free loads back. Like I'll take care of some of that bills, and then I'll wash my hands from it and walk away, and then use that for like research for like later on. But the conversation actually went really, really well. So we're actually like we haven't got anything yet, but it's moving through. It's moving through the process. So
And you know what? You answered that question probably on like the polar opposite of what anyone else would answer. And I think that's also a way where you're standing and you're saying, whoa, 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 I know I'm worth something.
mhm.
I know what I do and I know how I can help. I get it. Your phones are blowing up, but they're blowing up from people that are just hoping to get business.
Yeah.
I choose you just as much as you choose me because I want the right people on the bus. And that for a lot of people is tough to hear, especially because they're in the pedestal position, right? How many salespeople call them and put them on the pedestal? Uh, I love hearing no.
Yeah.
I love it when somebody says, I'm not interested. And I always, okay, no problem. I understand that. Why is it that you're not interested? So, for example, with Bridger, right? Anytime I connect with somebody, they say, you know what, Dan, not interested. I said, okay, I get it. If you don't mind me asking, why is it that you're not interested in taking 10 minutes out to see an alternate system? Like, what does your system do so good that you're not even? And I do this with traffic managers. I do it everybody because I'm truly wanting to learn. Like, what if there's a piece of a system that they love so well that we forgot to put in our system? Right? I'm like, now I'll tell you, out of 100, I maybe get one person reply back because in their mind, it's like, I told you I'm done, and yet you're still acting. And it's not as if it's, you know, one of these calls where like somebody calls you up and says, hey, do you want to buy this? And you're like, no, I'm good. And they're like, well, what about this? And then they go back to the sell.
Yeah.
And I know that's the way we've been programmed, right? Like we literally have been on so many of these bullshit sales calls as as humans. We're programmed with certain things like, how you doing today? Oh my God, it's a sales call. Like, right. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
your
yeah,
brain
yeah. Well,
immediately
Glenn
goes,
mentioned that too, right? Go straight
yeah,
for it. At least
yeah,
acknowledge it, right? And
yeah,
that how are you doing today? How's the weather? All that stuff. It's just,
yeah.
it just makes you more angry, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like and here's where this is where this part of the chapter, because he says, just like step out of that. And so
Mhm.
me, I start thinking to myself, what if you call the traffic manager up and said, hey, I'm not gonna ask you how you are, how your day is, or what the weather's like, because that's complete bullshit. I don't know you, you don't know me. And do you really care about what the weather's like at my place? Because I don't care what the weather is like over there. I'm calling for a specific reason. And I wonder how that would go over. And I don't know
Mhm.
if that would go over
Yeah, I was
well.
just gonna say, I don't know, I don't know. I
Why
like to
not?
kind. Well, here's the thing, it could work for some people, right?
Yeah.
So, and with everything that comes from our show, it's just like, take it with a grain of salt and use whatever
Yeah.
you use. It's just like even with this book, right? Like Dan and I are mentioning, we read the same 20 pages of this book and we took different things from it, right? So
Yeah.
I think like with when it comes to sales, when it comes to anything in life, when it comes to recipes, every single thing that we have in life, take it, use what's going to benefit you and what works for you, because they're the customer that you want out there is waiting for you specifically. Like
Mm.
they've said no to X amount of people already, but they want your personality, they want your services that you can provide, they want all those things. So yeah, just continue to tweak with it and have fun with it.
Ryan, you mentioned something there that is so powerful. You and I are a lot alike. We think a lot alike. Um, we're goal driven. Like we have a lot of personality traits that are very similar. We have a lot of likes that we like that are very similar. And we just read the same pages and we come back with different stuff.
Yeah.
And that, I think, for anyone watching and listening, if you didn't catch that, rewind and listen to this again, because no matter what you do, somebody else that does the exact same thing is going to see something or hear something different, right? um, I think this is such an important piece of the puzzle in life, in creating that happiness. Like he said, joy is from the inside,
Yeah.
right? And so in this chapter he starts talking about, like, happiness is fleeting, joy is from the inside. He says, like, you're happy because you just bought something, and but that happiness fades, right? And I look at that and I say, how many of us, and just think to yourself, you're in a bad mood, you're feeling depressed, you open up the Amazon app and you just buy, whether it's something for 15 bucks or 25 bucks, you
Yeah.
immediately feel better.
Yeah.
You know, I just, it's funny because I'm listening to this morning while I was working out. And 2 minutes before we hit that part of the chapter, I'm exercising and I'm realizing I need more bands. And I was like, and I was getting frustrated because my bands are snapping, and I was getting down because I'm not getting my heart rate up. And as soon as I purchased a new set of bands, it was like I was a whole new person. Same bands in my house because they haven't been delivered yet. They're being delivered today. But same bands in my house, same exercise equipment. But I was like this whole new person.
Yeah.
And as that happened, and here was like the big holy shikeys for me today, listening to this chapter, is I specifically do not listen to the chapter until the morning of, because I want it to be so fresh. I want it to be like, I want everyone to hear my initial thoughts, and then kind of will regurgitate over it, and then, you know, share. And when we do the recap of the book, I'll share some aha moments that I didn't get when I first read, but now I have.
Yeah.
And then within like 3 minutes, it says, you know, when you're feeling down and everything, and then you buy something, you like completely changes you. And I'm like, dude, and you're like looking around like, did they have a camera on me or something? Like, holy shit, did this just happen? It's like Ron White. You're sitting in a beanbag chair eating Cheetos. What? I know you guys. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't get that, but no, but Dan, that's so. I love that you bring up that point because you know you went and bought the bands, but realistically, you're gonna forget about the bands until it gets delivered to your house, right? So you're gonna go on through your day, and like there's so many times like, you know, we purchase things and we're excited. It's that like dopamine, like that what we gotta crave. But you know, like we said, you buy it, you're good, you have that little like whatever that time frame is that you're excited for it, and then you go on about your day. And then when it gets to your door, you get that email, you're like, oh yeah, I grabbed this, you know, like
and
at
then
our
a
house,
week later of using them, it's just normal.
it's just a normal thing, right? And you think that we put it on the pedestal that, you know, it's going to change our lives. And, you know, it brings up a great point here when he says that, you know, the illusion of control in this chapter, you know, the idea of control is challenged. Like he suggests that, you know, true power comes from surrendering to the present moment rather than trying to control or manipulate it. And I think about that quite a bit in terms of like this, right? Because you're still like, you know, you're working out, you know, you have what you actually need and what you need to get going. But you know, you're gonna try to control that and make that a bad experience, and like we said, the happiness and unhappiness. But when I've looked at my life in terms of the things that I've tried to control, and I don't know about this, Dan, because like my wife kind of brings it up to me. It's just because it happens with her sister, that in terms of, you know, it could be an older sibling thing. You know, the older sibling is always kind of going to be that one in control who kind of dictates, you know, we're going here, you know, we're going to the movies, we're going to go see this movie. You know, little sibling might be like, no, we want to see this. It's like, no, we're going to go. Like they're so high strung. And I used to take pride in that fact of being, you know, like I'm the one in control, like nothing ever goes wrong. You know, like if I'm going to go to somewhere brand new, I got the Google Maps, like location, everything like that, no shortcuts. Like and it's really changed my perspective because like, it's like going with the flow. Like I'll give you a great example. This weekend, tomorrow night, I'm going over to Vancouver for the very first time. And full transparency,
are you leaving tonight or tomorrow night?
Sorry, it's tomorrow morning. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah, tomorrow morning.
So Saturday morning. Okay.
Yeah, Saturday morning. And full transparency, I didn't book my return trip yet. You know, and for me, the planned Ryan and organized Ryan would be like, no, you have to have that booked. You know, you want to do A, B, and C. I'd be like Googling or TikTok. I'm like, you know what? I'm really going with the flow. There's only two things that I have that needs to be done is the reason why I'm going. So we're gonna go see wrestling, and then 2, meet up with Damon on Monday. And then other than that, like, I don't know, man. I could come back on Tuesday. I could come back on Wednesday. I could come back on Monday. Like, I don't know, but I'm looking forward to it. And I'll be journaling. So we'll see. When I come back, I could be like, oh no, that's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. You know? But
so is there any part of you, is there any part of the Ryan that is used to the scheduling, used to having kind of everything in order? Is there any part of that Ryan that you find coming through now that you're trying to, like, because going with the flow at home is one thing. Going with the flow when you're across the country is a totally different story. And do you find any of that coming back kind of as it was anxiety, maybe uncertainty, maybe a little?
I think it would if I was like staying by myself or something like that. Like if I book I'm staying at my wife's cousin's place. So like for me, and just want to relate this back to logistics, it's like, you know, if we're going into it alone, we can find anxiety. But when you have either a teammate or you have that customer who's already been there before, they've already been to prom and they already know. So when I go to Vancouver, I trust him as like A, to keep me safe, and B, knowing where all the cool spots are. Right. So he's going to be kind of like my tour guide. It's not going to be like, hey, I saw this restaurant on TikTok, you know, let's go here and things like that. I haven't done any research because, like I said, I always want to kind of go with the flow. So to answer your question, no, just because I have safety there. you
You
know.
have a
But
safety net that's kind of big.
yeah, like if I was gonna stay
Yeah.
at a hotel or Airbnb by myself and not know, and I was like, I would want to put an itinerary and things like that because you're just by yourself, right? If you're like, hey, I want to go to the museum, you don't have to convince anybody. You just get up and go, right?
Mm,
So
mhm.
for me, so yeah, to answer your question, no, just because like I'm gonna be with familiar people, right? Like I've met her cousin so many times. I met Damon. Well, Damon's like families to us now, and then things like that. We've known Damon for a while, right? So for me,
He's my
it's
brother
just
from another mother.
there we go,
You know what I'm
man.
saying?
Your chocolate mother,
Yeah,
like
there you
the
go. There
yeah,
you go. There you go.
caramel mother.
I
So
used to love chocolate. Um, so okay, so I love that you've actually already thought through that because of the safety net. I think that that brings up a good conversation for another show, and maybe we'll
yeah,
talk about safety nets, both going to your first meeting or going to meetings and having that safety net of somebody with you,
yeah,
operations person,
yeah,
um, the safety net of having a really good manager help walk you through projections at this time of the year, because we're coming
yeah,
right into that projection season for 2024, right? What do you see? What's
yeah.
happening? Where are you at with your sales? Like, everybody's starting to look at where we're finishing the year, and
Mm.
all these things that go along with being at coming into this last quarter of the year.
Well, even that safety
um
net too of being like a salaried rep and thinking about or wanting to go to agent, right? Going to full commission and being a W-2 worker and things like that. So there's so many safe. Yeah, we should definitely do that. A
yeah.
week of definitely safety nets because there's so many we can get into there.
Oh, I mean, huge, right? Huge. So one thing I want to share
Yep.
from this chapter that really kind of stopped me, and I started thinking about it, and I'd love your thoughts on it. Eckhart Tolle says most of the bad things that happen in people's lives are self-created or ego-created. Most of it manifests as drama.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow. And he says, you think about it, you cause most of the challenges in your life.
Yep.
And what's your first thoughts on that, Brody?
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. And then I know maybe you might go with this, and some people might be like, like, how can I cause like health problems or something like that to me, right? But with everything, there's a lesson to be learned. I truly believe
Mm,
that. So in terms of like drama and things like that, I've made my circle and like the things that I indulge in and the things that I do so like drama free to a point that like it's just not feasible to be in that negative, so that have that bad consequences, right? And for me it's just like I got like Toastmasters, I got like my business, I got our business and things like that, and these are the things that keep me occupied, and knowing that I can, but then control as well, right? There's a good mix, like you bring up something there. If he's talking about control and we're trying to control and manipulate it, then he kind of contradicts what you kind of just said, right? It's just like, okay,
mm.
well, we're creating this. So it's just like, okay, well, our bad thoughts. If you send your bad thoughts one day, and then you're like, okay, well, I'll get to the gym tomorrow, or I'll eat healthy tomorrow, I'll quit sugar tomorrow. And then you're like, oh, then you're automatically going to start resonating with all the posts you see about like Oreos and like all these like really unhealthy foods and things like that, right? Because you're like, oh, I'm going to be giving up so much. I'm going to have to sacrifice so much just for that.
Mm.
So I agree with that. I think we are who we say we are, and we are what we give the universe. Whatever we project is what we become.
So I totally agree with this. I believe, and you've heard me say it a million times, what you do screams so loud I can't hear a word you say.
Yeah.
Um, I think, even when it comes to illnesses, and I can say this because I've fought one of the nastiest illnesses anyone can ever get, and still fighting it. Um, it all happens for a reason, and there's lessons I learned, Ryan. And here's what I believe, and I think my life, as much as I had really good parts of my life, the big part of my life, and I've said it to you many times, I'm sure I've shared it on the show many times, I had zero ability to control my sugar intake.
Yeah.
Zero. I quit drinking, I was an alcoholic. I quit drugs, I was a drug addict. I quit smoking, I was a smoker. All of it was just wake up one morning and say, done, never going to touch it again. You can bet everything that you have on this godly planet that a drop of alcohol will never be ingested in me, um, like willingly ever again.
Yeah.
And I say willingly because I got served actually a couple of months ago. I got served an actual beer. Never even realized it was a beer because non-alcoholic beer tastes so close to the real stuff now. I didn't even realize. And halfway through the Heineken, I looked at my wife and I said, like, I'm dizzy. I'm about to fall over. Like, I
Yeah.
was a really cheap date. But I will never ever put alcohol in my body again intentionally.
Hmm.
And I'll tell you one thing, Ryan. I was able to quit all of that, but sugar had me hooked.
Yeah.
Like every single time I went by a donut shop, I had to stop. I had every night, I had candy, sour keys, gummy worms, whatever it was. Like I had drawers full of it. And I truly believe in my heart of hearts, it gave me diabetes. And that was the universe's first lesson to me is like, hey, you just totally took out your pancreas. Um, and now you're going to be sticking yourself with needles your whole life. Wake up. And I didn't. And again, people can choose to say, holy shit, Dan, that's morbid. But I think it's why I got sick because the universe said it's time for you to reset. And I didn't realize this at the beginning, but I'm realizing it more and more. It's time for you to get with people that truly care and where you can be unified and help each other reach heights that nobody thought was possible in life. And I think this is where our group got together for Bridger. I really do. And you start looking at the people we associate with.
Yeah.
I've never had friends like this in my life.
Me too.
Ever,
Yeah.
ever, 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 ever. Like, and I thought, growing up and in my mid 20s, I was like, man, if I died today, I'd have hundreds of people at my funeral. They weren't friends. I hardly talked to any of them. And it's like, and I've really started realizing that no matter what happens, it's self-inflicted in some
Yeah.
which way, shape, or form. Like you look at people that say, well, I got in an accident because somebody ran through the red light. Okay, I understand that. But did you maybe go 20 kilometers faster than the speed limit? Because if you would have done the speed limit, you wouldn't have been at that red light at that specific time. And again, I mean, we can get so deep in, and everybody's going to have totally different opinions, right? There's going to
Yeah.
be people out there that say, absolutely friggin' not, Dan. That is complete bullshit. But
This is our interpretation of the book, it's, and you know what, if you disagree with this, then I would hope at least that you're reading the book yourself, like I feel like, and then you give us your thoughts as well, and this is what the collaboration, this is what the Book Club Fridays is really about. I feel like this is the most collaboration we do because like we're going through these chapters with each and every one of you. And no matter if you're watching this like today live or you're watching this even like 5-6 months like later in the future, right? Because like those messages are still going to be there. Right. So like even like Dan, you're talking about, like that getting rear-ended. And if you did the thing, I think even with this book, a good message for that is like, okay, you thought about that. Think about the times that, you did the right thing. Like, think about the times you never got in an accident, right? Like, think about the times that you did your daily drive and it went smoothly and stuff like that. And, just understand that there's a balance to everything. Like this, unfortunately, this was your turn to do it. But like think about like the 99.9%, like knock on wood, Dan, I've never been in a fender bender, so I consider myself lucky because like my parents have been driving me since I was a baby, right? So knock on wood, right? But like it's just like it just happens with life. So with everybody else, when we relate this back to sales, like understand that I'm a big believer in clapping until it's your turn. So don't be jealous, don't have that egotistical mind. Understand that your time is going to come, you're going to get your time to shine. Right. So it's just like understand, like, like Michael Jordan's not going to come from his pinnacle right now being like in his 50s or 60s to play basketball. He had his time, one of the greatest basketball players of all time. But right now he can just really relive on like, the good old days. Right. So
and that's actually a huge issue for a lot of athletes, right? Is they train so hard and their life revolves. And this would be another good topic for us because we and in the book, Eckhart goes into it all the time, right? You become what you do. Or you think your identity and your future and your happiness is tied to what you do. And this is a huge thing specifically in the sports world because when people get too old to play the sport, or they, like how many people, like Magic Johnson is a perfect example, came out of retirement how many times because he's like, I just love, like my whole life is tied to basketball,
revolving around
and he
it.
was past his time, and there's younger people coming up and he's getting trashed. And it was like, if you watch the Magic Johnson specials at the end, he's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have gone back that third or fourth time because he got trampled. And I think especially for salespeople,
Yeah.
you get so entwined with, and I know for me, I'll speak for myself, for example, when I started really like going gangbusters and making huge amounts of GP,
Yeah.
I was almost afraid to make sales calls. And I have no problem admitting it. No, I was terrified to make sales calls because I felt like and this is the ego, nothing to do with me as it was my ego that said, I'm doing these massive numbers and this person just said no.
Yeah. Who are you? Yeah.
WTF, man. Like what?
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh my God, I lost the gift.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's sales, man.
It's sales.
Some will, some won't. So what? As Andrea always says, but it's like, that's what we get to because we stop selling. And this is one of the big things I've pushed in logistics for so long now is never stop selling. Like always be prospecting, because the mind will play those friggin' tricks on you. It's like, no, you suck now. You haven't closed in like 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Because my pipeline was dry like the Sahara Desert. That's why I haven't closed in 3 months. Like
there's nothing to close. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's like, no, it always goes back to, oh no, it's you. There's something wrong.
Yeah.
Like even when I worked for this company, I worked for them for 7 months. I didn't close one deal, Ryan, not one friggin' deal. And I started to think to myself, I suck. How did I go from being so good to so bad like that? And I realized I had zero confidence in the company. I started reviewing my prospecting. I started reviewing my meetings. And when they would ask me about the company or something along those lines, I had zero belief in my operations team. I had zero belief in the owners. Like I didn't even know why I was there. And that was a huge realization that like, wow, I'm selling, but I'm coming across as this liar. Like, and maybe it was more of a, well, this person's really, but in my head, when I realized it, it's like, holy crap, I've been lying for this amount of, does that make sense to you? Like,
yeah, you're just like, well, it's imposter syndrome, and we can talk about that. That's something that I talk about quite a bit. Anytime I do speeches, is that imposter syndrome. Like it's not me and things like that. But getting back to the book, I think this has been like such a great chapter to really balance for everybody's kind of watching. My kind of like summary of this chapter is really understand that there's different states and don't get sucked into those states quite a bit.
Yeah.
Understand that there's like duality and everything, and there's liberation. I think like the chapter really like concludes with that true peace is not dependent on external circumstances or achievements. So understand that those material things. And then just a quick story, my wife and I were joking yesterday, and I went to my prayer, and she's like, pray for me. And I was like, well, we don't pray for material things in this house. We just pray that everything keeps going well, and like we have like these things. So I can't pray for a new Louis bag for you, but I could pray for me to put in the work to get you a new one, right? So that's a joke from there. But understanding like for me, it's just, what is true peace? I don't, what too, Dan? I feel like I love this journey of life so much that pursuit of happiness, that pursuit of true peace, I might not even get this in this lifetime, but just that journey alone to that is pretty fucking cool.
So I go back to what we talked about, what Jeff Bezos said in our video yesterday, right? I think the true peace will come when you lie on your deathbed and said, man, I went for everything.
Yeah.
Like I didn't hold back. I didn't allow fear to stop me. I tried it. And if it didn't work, it didn't work. And 99% of them did work. And this goes back to where I stopped writing because I said, wow, this is such a needle drop.
Yeah.
Ego is the unobserved mind that runs your life when you're not present. And think about that for a second, Ryan. How many unconscious, unpresent decisions have you made that have been ruled by ego?
Oh, a lot, brother, a lot. And it's
I don't even think we can count.
We can't count, man. I think we get 50,000 thoughts a day. So if we even want to put that, but Dan, coming back to what you just said about like with Jeff Bezos being on a deathbed, think about this too, right?
Hmm.
How many of us actually make it to that point? Like
Yeah.
not a lot of us actually make, either it's a sudden death or like something
Mm.
takes over and like we're like we don't I would say like not a lot like that conception of like we're all gonna get old and we're gonna be on a deathbed, our grandkids are gonna be there, we're gonna tell them sometime, give them some advice, go through our will and stuff like that. But the reality, right, that expectation versus reality is that, hey man, like I can walk outside and get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? And it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, like I don't have that time to be like, oh, I really went after everything that I wanted to, because that's not going to be the reflection whoever is delivering my
Hmm.
eulogy, right? So I think with everybody, just like understand, like whatever your day kind of looks like, do it with peace, man. Do it with grace, do the
Yeah.
right thing that you think is the right thing.
And I would reiterate what Ryan says. Do everything you can do so you put your head down at night knowing you've done everything you can do that day.
Yeah.
And Ryan, I think specifically death really makes us think. And I'll share a quick story with you.
Yeah.
One of my son's friends, his parents were driving and got hit head on at 80K.
Hmm.
Um, Drunk driver, two people in the other car, they died instantly. Both his parents went into the hospital, and his mom died yesterday. Um, and so you think about how his life has changed, right? And in thinking about how his life has changed, I stopped and said, what if? What if I didn't say I love you to my daughter and son before they left? What if
Yeah.
the last thing that happened was an argument with his kids before him and his wife got in the car, never to be seen again? And I know it's morbid, and some people might think, but it's like this is the way life is.
Yeah.
So live every moment in that peace. Live every moment in the moment. That's why it's called the present, because it's a gift in that moment. The the past is history, the future is a mystery. The gift is now. And more as you read a book like this, and more as you actually dive into the words, and don't just read it to say, oh, I read a book. Like, digest it and
Yeah.
consume it, I guess, is a better word than reading it. Like, consume it. These things start changing your approach.
Hmm.
They start changing what you do. And unfortunately, death is one of those things, like, that are kind of a really big thing for people, that we go through. But try and keep that in your mind to help you work outside the egoic state and in the present moment, I would say. Yeah.
Love that, brother. Let's wrap that up after that, man. No better way.